So I just drew at first the supply and demand in our graph, put the equilibrium. I'll throw in the intercepts real quick, which we've done last class. So the first was that there's this price floor, so $36. And can anyone tell me what a price floor is? Like just a definition?
Like the lowest you're allowed to sell something for?
Right, it's a legal minimum price. You can't sell for less than $36. And this is going to affect the market. We were at 29, we were kind of okay, kind of happy, but then the government comes in and imposes this $36 floor. So now, we can't pay $29, we have to pay at least 36. And what that does is we're out of equilibrium. It changes, where the quantity that sellers wish to sell and that consumers want to buy. The higher price should lower the quantity demanded, and the higher price should increase quantity supplied. Those are just the law of supply and demand. So to find that, we can just plug in this 36 into both the demand and the supply to find that quantity. So just some algebra, and I'm going to put QD here just to get this as quantity demanded since we're out of equilibrium. If you left it as Q, that's fine though. You do the math, you should get that the quantity demanded here is 120. And it should be something less than the equilibrium. So at $29, we're paying 130, but at 36, it should be less than 130. In this case, it is. And supply, whatever this is, should be more than the equilibrium. Again, go into the algebra, and you should get 165. We have quantity supplied being greater than quantity demanded. So with this new price, this price floor, sellers are putting more of this item on the market. But buyers see this higher price and are like, ugh, I don't want this. I don't want to pay that much. This is known as a surplus. And it's always going to be a surplus when this price is above the equilibrium. And we can subtract QS minus QD, like 165 minus 120 for the amount. So the surplus is of 45 units. Again, it's just really the difference between what buyers and sellers are actually either buying or selling at this price. So price floor caused the surplus. A price ceiling is going to cause a shortage. So now instead of a legal minimum price, this is going to be a legal maximum price. And that was of what, 15. So now nobody can buy or sell for more than $15. Again, it's going to cause a difference in quantity demanded and quantity supplied. And as I said, going to cause a shortage. So ceilings, when they're below the equilibrium, are always going to cause shortages. We would do the same thing. Now quantity supplied, though, should be less, and quantity demanded should be on the higher end. I'll just start with demand since it's the first one, 20 minus 0.7 QD. And going through the algebra, should get quantity demanded as 150. Doing the same thing for supply. No, that's not supply. 3 plus 0.2 Q. Next slide. Should get only 60 units. So this difference, we can subtract the two, is 90. And that's the amount of the shortage. The lower price, again, sellers don't want to sell as much, but consumers look at this as a deal and they want to buy more of this item. So they're trying to get their hands on this. And there's 90 people, or there's 90 units wanted that aren't being sold now. So the ceiling should always be below the equilibrium to be effective and the floor above. I know sometimes students get this confused. You think ceiling should be higher and floor should be lower. But in the case of thinking about prices, the ceiling tells us we can't go above 15, so we stop at a ceiling, and the floor says we can't go below a certain amount, 36. So, it's the lower end. All right, so I'll put you back in your groups to the rest, do the elasticities and then the taxes. And maybe just to give you a hint for the elasticities, you might have to rearrange the formulas that you have for demand and supply. Just a hint. All right, let me know if you have questions and I'll pop around. Okay, I think everyone's back. Good. So by no means am I telling you should be done all of this already. So if you're not, don't feel bad. I just, for time, want to get through it. And that's why I called you back now. So we'll go through these and I want you to make sure you're understanding them. I saw some groups are having trouble with like people going in and out. I'm not sure why that was, but hopefully it wasn't too bad. And while you're in these groups, I'm hoping you're talking to your group mates and, really understanding how to solve these. If you're not sure about something, hopefully you're hearing what other people are saying, or, if you do know how to solve them, hopefully you're, explaining it to others. So I'll share. And we'll just start off talking about the elasticities. Now, what's the first thing we have to do when we want to solve these elasticities? First thing. Well, the first thing we should do is we can't use them in these forms, in the inverse forms. You need the regular supply and demand functions. Q equals a function of price. Because when we do the elasticities, we take the coefficient on price, not the coefficient on quantity. So let's see how this looks. If I do just the demand first, we want to get Q by itself, so we can add 0.7 Q on both sides and subtract price, and then divide each side by 0.7. And if I expand this a little bit, I'm going to keep this kind of in fractions. Now you can obviously definitely divide this out in your calculator, and that's okay too. So the second part is like 1p over 0.7, or we can say 1 over 0.7p, just to get the price away from the fraction a little bit. So you can divide this out and you get like 1.4 and there's decimals after. I'm keeping it in this form just so we don't have to round, and that might give us a little bit of a more accurate number. If you round though, that's fine, and I'll be able to see that. Then we do the same thing for the second one for supply. So we have 0.2 Q on one side equals price minus 3, or P minus 3, and divide everything by 0.2. And this would be similar. This is 1 over 0.2p. But when you put that in your calculator, you can leave it as that, but it actually comes out nice, comes out as 5p and minus 15. So again, I'm leaving this 1 over 0.7 here, just so I don't have to round. If you round, that's no problem. Now, once they're in this form, we can actually solve for the elasticities. Remember, the elasticities are kind of like B times P over Q, where the B term is the coefficient on price. So for demand here, it's negative 1 over 0.7. And then I told you to use the equilibrium values. So price here is 29 and quantity 130. So again, put this now all in your calculator and you will round here. Keep the negative for demand. This is about 3.319. Rounded to decimal places, that's okay too. But this should be negative, so keep the negative sign. Now, what does this number mean for demand? I put a poll up. Does someone have it, Evan?
I was gonna say that the goods could be complements.
So we're actually only talking about one good here.
Oh, right. So it's inferior.
So that would be, again, if we're talking about income, and we're not talking about that here. So here we're only referring to thinking about the number, and that's going to be either elastic or inelastic.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. So is it inelastic?
Yeah, inelastic's right. Okay, so I want to emphasize that we just have a supply and demand, and it's of one good. I didn't give you, an example, but this is of lemonade. So supply and demand of lemonade. And in the demand function, we don't have any information about income or other goods like the price of iced tea or something. That's already put in. So like the 120 already contains it. We don't have a variable for it. We don't need to worry about it right now. So we can't talk about, complements or substitutes or even normal or inferior because we don't have those other things. We don't have income and we don't have the price of other goods. So it has to stick to just talking about here, elasticity of demand, whether this in absolute value is greater or less than 1, and it's less than, so this is an inelastic demand. Yeah, we think about this in absolute value, not altogether. Now, supply is going to be a similar, formula, which still, this is B times P over Q, but the B term comes in the supply, and it's the number in front of price. So in this case, it's 5. And then the second part is exactly the same, so 29 over 130. The elasticity of supply should be positive. So this comes out to 1.115. You can do 1.12, that's fine too. So 1.115. What does this number mean for the elasticity of supply? Again, we want to think if this is greater or less than 1. In the chat, I see. I have to, And Dean said it's elastic in the chat, so great job. Yes. So again, we're thinking about greater or less than 1. This is greater than 1, so we name it elastic. And again, you can always put your answers in the chat when I ask questions. I know not everybody likes to go off mute, and it can be awkward, people interrupting each other. So if you put it in the chat, that's great too. Now with these numbers, which party, and when I say which party, I mean are the buyers or the sellers, which party is more price sensitive? All right, I'm going to put a poll up. And if you think the buyers are more price sensitive, you'll put answer A. And if you think the sellers are more price sensitive, you'll put B. So more price sensitive is the question. And for this, just ignore C and D. So you only have an A or a B here. About 10 more seconds if you didn't put an answer in. Who's more price sensitive?
Which one's A and which one's B?
A is the buyers on the demand side, and B is for sellers. Okay, I'm gonna end this. Show the results. So again, there's no answer C. So I'm thinking somebody wasn't paying attention. Got the majority for answer for B for sellers at 75%. And that is correct. We would say sellers are more price sensitive. And price sensitive really means more elastic. So they're elastic in general compared to inelastic demand. So we can say that's why they're more price sensitive. Or we can compare the elasticities. So whichever elasticity and absolute value is larger, means that they're more price sensitive too. So just 1.115 is greater in absolute value than 0.319, 0.32. So that's another way just to look at it. So larger elasticity in absolute value is that party is more price sensitive. So whenever I say party, I know it's not really a party, it's not really exciting, but it's buyers or sellers. Now, we could get an answer where both of these have an elastic curve. Like if buyers instead of 0.319 negative might be negative 1.319 or something like that, we would still compare and see which one is a larger number, and they would be at least a little bit more elastic or price sensitive. So that's how you'd compare just in absolute value. And that's important possibly later on. Now I'm going to switch here and look at the tax. So we have an $18 tax on sellers per unit. And really, this is what we're going to be doing, as examples in this class and, on problem sets. This is going to be a per unit tax, and it's going to be placed on sellers. Now, the original supply was the inverse supply, was 3 plus 0.2 Q. And to get the tax supply, I'm going to just put PT to indicate tax. All we do is add the 18 onto the inverse supply. So just to summarize or to simplify a little bit, 21 plus 0.2 Q. This new curve with the tax should be to the left of the original. So even without doing this out, that this curve should be to the left. Taxes are bad for sellers. It's a negative thing. The government wants money from them. So supply decreases or moves to the left. Now to make it more official, this new tax supply, that constant term is 21, and that is their new intercept for price, the 21, instead of the original one was 3. So the supply moves vertically up by the whole tax by $18. Now, what the tax does, the tax creates what we call a tax wedge. It gives the price to consumers that they have to pay, for this item. But when they give that money to sellers, the sellers only keep some of it, and some of that money goes to the government. So the price consumers pay is no longer equal to the price that sellers receive, and that's the tax wedge. So in order to find the price consumers pay, that's found here, where the new supply meets the demand curve. That gives us the price PC, which is what the consumers pay now. And if we bring this down to the x-axis or q-axis, we get the quantity with the tax. So how much is being bought and sold in the market. So I'm going to take the new supply, 21 minus 0.2Q, and equal it to the demand curve. So I'm equaling the prices. And we're just solving for Q now. So this is going to be 99 equals 0.9Q. This should be a positive here. Just put a negative at first. So the new quantity is 110 units. Again, it should be less than the original equilibrium because we now have this lower supply. Sorry, I have to move this a little to get to the chat. And yes, Vincent, the new tax supply, the new supply with the tax, it moved to the left of the original one, or decrease, we can say. Okay, so we got the quantity, but we still don't have that price. To get that price, all we have to do is plug the new quantity into one of these functions. So we can put it in demand, say, or we can put it in this new supply. Either one would be fine. So maybe I'll put it into demand since we're talking about consumers anyway. So it's 120 minus 0.7 times 110. And this gives us $43. So consumers, instead of going to the store and paying $29, they have to pay $43. To see how much the sellers are receiving, that's going to be called PS. We can do that in two ways. First, we can take this point and go down to the original supply. Really what I'm saying is put the new quantity into the supply without the tax. Or we might be easier is to take what we just found for PC and subtract the tax amount. Because again, the sellers are going to receive this $43 from the consumers. They can't keep it all. They have to give $18 to the government. So what's left over is what they now receive. So this is going to be 43 minus 18, or 25. That's here. Now what this tax wedge does is, again, it creates a difference between the price consumers pay and what sellers receive. This tax is going to lower consumer surplus and lower producer surplus. And remember, also create this deadweight loss, which is in this triangle here. There's some benefit or inefficiency, or well, there's some benefit to the market that's no longer there, it disappeared. Or this is also known as a measure of inefficiency, we can say. The taxes are going to create that. And the last thing we can find here is the government revenue, and that's found in this rectangle. And government revenue, kind of an easy equation. It's just going to be the tax amount times the new quantity with the tax. So it's, dot for times. So 18 times 110 here. And it's $1,980. That's how much the government is receiving because they place this tax in the market. Okay, now there's one other thing I didn't ask you to do. I'm gonna erase a little bit of this. Try to. We can also ask ourselves, what is the tax incidence of buyers and sellers here? Well, I have it on the graph. And when I say tax incidence, I mean how much of the tax are each of these parties, buyers and sellers, paying? find this incidence, we take the price consumers pay now and subtract what they were paying before at the equilibrium. This is 43 minus 18, or not 18, sorry, minus 29. And altogether, they pay $14 of this tax, because that's the difference between what they're paying now and what they were. The seller incidence we can find in two different ways. We can use the equilibrium price and then subtract what they're receiving now. Or we can take the tax amount and subtract the consumer incidence. So what we found above. Because these are the only two parties paying the tax. So altogether, the tax incidence has to be 18. So 18 minus 14 means that the sellers are paying $4 of the tax. Now I might ask you for the tax incidence as a percentage of the total tax. So this would be just like in general, like the number, the amount that each are paying of the tax. But if we wanted it as a percentage, we can do for the consumer just 14 and divide it by the total of the tax, 18, and then times 100%. And this gives us, go ahead. All right, this should give us 77.78%. So of the total tax, sellers are paying 77.78%. For sellers, it's 4 over 14 times 100%. And this is 22.22%. These two added together should give you 100%, and that's one way to check yourself. So adding this should equal 100%. It might be off like by a decimal because of rounding, but if you get like 100.1, that should be fine. So buyers are paying a lot more of the tax. They're paying, $14 of the 18, or 78% almost of the tax. I want you to think about for next class why they're paying more. Why do buyers have to pay more here instead of the sellers? Take some time and think about that. All right, we're going to end here. We're pretty much done chapter 1.